It was a quiet afternoon in the small town of Brooksville. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows over the little houses that lined the street. On the porch of one of those houses sat John Harris, a 93-year-old man who had seen more in his lifetime than anyone in this town could imagine. His hands, though wrinkled, were steady as he sipped his coffee, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The peace of the moment was interrupted by the distant growl of engines. John didn't flinch. He had heard that sound before, many times in fact, over the past few weeks. It was the bikers again. Rex and his gang roared up to John's front yard, their laughter breaking the silence of the afternoon. Rex, the leader, was a towering figure, all leather and tattoos, with a sneer permanently etched on his face. The others followed suit, parking their bikes on John's lawn as if it were their personal garage. Well, if it isn't our favorite grandpa," Rex called out, hopping off his bike with a swagger. The others laughed, echoing their leader's arrogance. John didn't respond. He sat there, his calm demeanor unshaken by the intimidation tactics. This was not the first time the bikers had harassed him, and it wouldn't be the last. At least, that's what they thought. "What's the matter, old man? Cat got your tongue?" Rex jeered, stepping closer. He knocked John's coffee cup from his hand, watching it shatter on the porch. John looked at the broken cup, then back at Rex, his eyes cold but composed. "You've had your fun. Now leave." "Oh, we're just getting started," Rex said, leaning in closer. "What are you going to do about it, old-timer? Call the cops? Go ahead. I'll be out in an hour. Tops." John's eyes didn't waver. "I'm not calling the cops." Rex paused for a second, confused by John's calmness. "Yeah? Then who are you going to call?" John stood up slowly, his joints creaking as he rose to his full height, still taller than Rex by a few inches. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old flip phone. "I'm going to make one call," John said, his voice steady, "and when I do, you're all going to wish you never set foot on this lawn." For the first time, Rex faltered, but he quickly covered it with a laugh. "Yeah, right. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters?" John's eyes narrowed, and with a simple push of a button, the phone began to ring. As the phone rang in John's hand, Rex's laughter echoed around the yard. The bikers joined in, amused by the audacity of the old man. They had been pushing him for weeks, vandalizing his property, harassing him in the streets, and no one in the small town dared to stand up to them. Why would today be any different? But something in John's demeanor unsettled Rex. Despite his confident facade, a small voice in the back of his mind warned him to tread carefully. There was something about the way John held himself, unshaken, resolute, that didn't fit the image of a frail, helpless old man. "Who's on the other end of that phone, old man? Your bingo buddies?" Rex taunted, stepping closer. "Let me guess. They're coming to scare us off, right?" John didn't reply. His eyes remained locked on Rex, and the sound of the ringing phone hung in the air. Rex was losing his patience. He grabbed the phone from John's hand and looked at the screen. "Just one call, huh?" Rex sneered. "Let's see who you're bothering." Before Rex could hang up, a voice answered on the other end. John spoke calmly, his tone unwavering. "Ethan, it's time. Activate the protocol." Rex frowned, the phone still in his hand. "Protocol? What kind of nonsense is this?" John simply looked at Rex, his expression never changing. "You'll find out soon enough." For a moment, there was an awkward silence. Rex tossed the phone back to John, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're just an old man with nothing left. I don't care who you think you are. We run this town now." John remained unfazed, his calm gaze making Rex increasingly uneasy. The bikers were still laughing, but their leader wasn't as sure of himself as before. There was something about the old man's confidence that bothered him, and he didn't like it one bit. "Come on, let's get out of here. This geezer's not worth our time," one of the bikers muttered. The others grumbled in agreement, but Rex wasn't ready to leave just yet. "No," Rex growled, his eyes narrowing. "We're going to teach this old man a lesson." He stepped closer to John, his hand raised as if to strike, but before he could do anything, John's phone buzzed with a text message. John calmly opened it, his lips curling into a slight smile. Rex snatched the phone again and looked at the message. His face twisted into confusion. The message was from Ethan, and it read, "Target locked. Phase 1 initiated." "What the hell is this?" Rex spat, shoving the phone back at John. John didn't reply. He simply turned and walked back to his house, leaving Rex standing there, fuming with unanswered questions. Rex couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As he led his gang back to the clubhouse, the laughter and bravado had faded. His mind raced with questions about the strange phone call and the cryptic message. What did protocol mean? Why did the old man seem so unfazed by their threats? Back at the clubhouse, Rex tried to push the doubts from his mind. He gathered the gang, talking tough, planning their next moves, but deep down he couldn't let go of that nagging feeling. Later that night, Rex's phone buzzed. It was a message from his bank. He opened it and stared in disbelief. "Your account has been temporarily frozen due to suspicious activity." "What the hell?" Rex muttered, checking his other accounts. Each one gave the same message: frozen. Confused and enraged, he called the bank, but all he got was a vague explanation about unusual transactions and a warning that it might take days to resolve. Rex slammed the phone down, cursing under his breath. Was this a coincidence? Could John really have something to do with it? As Rex wrestled with his frustration, he wasn't the only one feeling the heat. His gang members started receiving similar messages: bank accounts frozen, credit cards declined, and strange charges appearing on their records. It was as if their lives were being systematically dismantled, piece by piece. Meanwhile, John sat in his living room, watching the events unfold in real time on his computer screen. Ethan had set up a secure connection, feeding him updates from his operations. The bikers had no idea that their financial lives were being torn apart by a 93-year-old man and his tech-savvy grandson. "They're starting to feel it," Ethan's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "Their accounts are frozen, and I flagged their names with every financial institution we could access. By tomorrow, they won't even be able to buy a cup of coffee without raising red flags." John nodded, satisfied but calm. "Good work, Ethan. But we're not done yet." "There's more?" Ethan asked, curious about his grandfather's next move. John leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing with determination. "I made a promise, and I intend to keep it. We're going to shut them down completely, financially, legally, and physically." The next phase of their plan was already in motion. John had used his contacts from his military days to gather intelligence on Rex and his gang. What Ethan had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. The bikers were involved in far more than petty harassment. They had deep ties to organized crime, and John had every intention of exposing them. The next morning, Rex woke to chaos. Half of his gang was in disarray. Some had been arrested overnight for outstanding warrants. Others were scrambling to figure out how their lives had been turned upside down. Rex's phone was blowing up with messages, each one more frantic than the last. "This doesn't make any sense," Pete, one of his most loyal followers, said. "It's like someone's watching everything we do." Rex slammed his fist on the table. "This has to be that old man. He's doing something to us." "How?" Pete asked, looking around nervously. "He's just one guy." Rex didn't have an answer, but he was determined to find out. He wasn't about to let some old man ruin everything he had built. "Get the bikes ready," Rex ordered. "We're paying him another visit." But as they prepared to leave, a convoy of unmarked cars pulled up outside the clubhouse. Men in suits stepped out, flashing badges. "FBI, stay where you are." Rex froze. He had known his gang was involved in illegal activity, but he never expected it to come crashing down like this. As he was cuffed and led away, his mind raced back to John's words. "You're all going to wish you never set foot on this lawn." As Rex was being taken away in handcuffs, his mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Just hours ago, he was the one in control, terrorizing the town with his gang, untouchable by the locals or law enforcement. Now, everything was crumbling in front of him, and he was powerless to stop it. But one thought dominated his mind: John Harris. How had that old man managed to do this? Back at John's house, the elderly veteran watched from his porch as the unmarked cars drove past. He knew that this was just the beginning. The plan was working, but there was still more to do. Rex was only a piece of the puzzle, and John's years of experience told him that the bigger threat was still out there. His phone rang. It was Ethan. "Grandpa, they got Rex. He's being taken in for questioning. The feds were all over it, just like you said they would be." John nodded, his voice calm. "Good. But this isn't over yet, Ethan. We need to dig deeper. Rex may be out of the picture for now, but there are others. We have to make sure they all go down." Ethan's fingers flew across his keyboard. "I'm on it. I'll keep digging into their connections. I've already flagged a few more accounts tied to the syndicate." John's eyes darkened. "Don't stop until we have everything. I want every last one of them taken down." Later that evening, John sat in his study, staring at a photograph of himself and his old military unit. The picture was worn and faded, but the memories were as sharp as ever. These were the men he had fought beside, the ones who had trusted him with their lives. And now, decades later, some of those same men were still by his side, albeit in different ways. He picked up the phone again, this time dialing a number he hadn't called in years. After a few rings, a familiar voice answered. "John Harris," the voice said. "It's been a long time." "Too long, McCaffrey," John replied, recognizing the voice of his old commanding officer. "I need a favor." There was a pause on the other end. "What kind of favor are we talking about?" "The kind that involves taking down a criminal syndicate," John said bluntly. "I've got the intel, but I need the manpower." McCaffrey chuckled. "You always did know how to dive straight into the deep end, didn't you? Send me what you've got. I'll mobilize my contacts, and we'll make sure this thing gets shut down for good." John felt a sense of relief. McCaffrey was one of the few men he could trust to handle something of this magnitude. And with his influence in government and military circles, John knew they had a fighting chance to not only stop the bikers, but also dismantle the larger criminal organization behind them. Meanwhile, in a nondescript office building hundreds of miles away, a man sat behind a large desk reviewing a file. His name was Victor Lang, and he was one of the most powerful men in the criminal underworld. He had connections in almost every major illegal enterprise, and his influence reached far beyond local gangs like Rex's. But now, something had come across his desk that concerned him. The file in front of him contained detailed reports of arrests, financial freezes, and FBI investigations, many of which were directly tied to Rex's gang. This kind of attention was bad for business. It was clear that someone had interfered, someone who had resources and the ability to take down an entire operation in a matter of days. Victor picked up the phone and made a call. "We have a problem," he said. "I need you to find out who's behind this. I want them dealt with, quietly." The voice on the other end simply replied, "Consider it done." Victor hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, his mind already calculating his next moves. He knew that the key to surviving in this business was staying one step ahead, and whoever had disrupted his operations was about to learn just how dangerous it could be to cross Victor Lang. Back in Brooksville, life seemed to return to normal. With Rex and several of his gang members in custody, the town felt a renewed sense of peace. But John knew better. This was only a temporary reprieve. The real battle was just beginning, and he wasn't about to let his guard down. One afternoon, as John sat on his porch, Ethan pulled up in his car, a laptop in hand. He had been working non-stop, tracking down every lead, every loose end connected to Rex's operation. And now he had something to show his grandfather. "Grandpa, you need to see this," Ethan said, setting up the laptop on the porch table. John watched as Ethan pulled up a series of files, each one detailing bank transfers, shell companies, and offshore accounts. It was a web of corruption and criminal activity that reached far beyond what they had initially suspected. "This is bigger than Rex," Ethan said. "I've traced the money back to someone named Victor Lang. He's connected to everything: drug trafficking, arms dealing, you name it. And Rex's gang was just one of his small operations." John's jaw tightened. "Victor Lang," he muttered. I've heard that name before. He's dangerous. Ethan nodded. I've already flagged his accounts, but he's got too many layers of protection. We're going to need more than just hacking skills to take him down. John's mind raced. Victor Lang was no small-time criminal. He was a mastermind, someone who had built an empire on illegal activities. Taking him down would require more than just freezing accounts. It would require a coordinated effort, one that involved more than just John and Ethan. We're going to need McCaffrey, John said, and we're going to need to be careful. Victor Lang won't go down without a fight. John made another call to McCaffrey, laying out the details of what they had uncovered. McCaffrey, true to his word, had already mobilized his contacts, and within hours a task force was being assembled. But McCaffrey had a warning for John. Lang is a different breed, McCaffrey said. He's smart and he's ruthless. If we go after him, we have to be prepared for retaliation. I know the risks, John replied, but this needs to end. We've come too far to back down now. McCaffrey agreed. All right then, we're in this together. I'll coordinate with the feds, and we'll make sure Lang is taken out of play. But you need to stay out of sight for now. If Lang gets wind that you're involved, he won't hesitate to come after you. John understood the gravity of the situation. Lang wasn't just a local thug like Rex. He had the resources to reach anyone, anywhere. But John wasn't afraid. He had faced worse enemies in his time, and he wasn't about to let fear dictate his actions now. As John hung up the phone, he looked out at the horizon, the weight of the impending battle heavy on his shoulders. But he knew one thing for certain. He had spent his life protecting the innocent, and he wasn't about to stop now. In the weeks that followed, John, Ethan, and McCaffrey worked tirelessly behind the scenes. The feds were now involved, building a case against Victor Lang and his sprawling criminal empire. But as the net tightened around Lang, he became more unpredictable, and John knew it was only a matter of time before Lang struck back. Ethan had been monitoring all digital channels, and one evening, something troubling appeared on his radar. A private message, encrypted but traceable, sent to one of Lang's top lieutenants. The message contained John's name and a chilling set of instructions. "They know it's you, Grandpa," Ethan said, his voice tense as he showed John the message. "Lang's ordered a hit. They're coming for you." John remained calm, though he felt the weight of Ethan's words settle over him. This was no longer about a battle of wits or strategy. This had become personal. Lang's men were ruthless, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill to protect their boss's empire. "Then we'll be ready," John said, his voice steady. "It's time to go on the offensive." As night fell, John prepared his house for what was to come. He had been in more dangerous situations before, but this time it was different. He wasn't just defending himself. He was protecting Ethan and the town from a man who had no limits. John's years of military training kicked in, his mind sharp and methodical. Ethan watched as his grandfather set up various security measures around the house, hidden cameras, alarms, and makeshift traps that could slow down anyone attempting to break in. Despite his age, John moved with a sense of purpose, his actions precise and calculated. "Are you sure we're ready for this?" Ethan asked, his concern growing. "We don't have a choice," John replied. "Lang's men won't stop until they finish the job, but they've underestimated us." Ethan nodded, trusting his grandfather's judgment, though the tension in the air was palpable. Every shadow outside seemed to move, and every sound felt like a warning of the impending storm. As they waited for the inevitable, John received a call from McCaffrey. The task force was moving in on Lang's operations across the country, and they had already taken down several key players. But Lang himself remained elusive, his location still unknown. "We're close, John," McCaffrey said, "but you need to hold tight. Don't engage unless you have no other choice. We'll take care of Lang." "I'm not one to sit and wait," John replied, his tone firm, "but I'll do what I have to." McCaffrey understood. John had always been a man of action, but this situation required caution. The last thing they needed was for John to get caught in the crossfire. As the call ended, John and Ethan heard the faint sound of motorcycles in the distance. The bikers were coming, just as Lang had ordered. The roar of engines grew louder, and soon the headlights of motorcycles appeared at the edge of John's property. It was clear that Lang had sent some of his best men, hardened criminals who had no qualms about doing whatever it took to eliminate their target. John and Ethan watched from inside the house as the bikers parked their bikes and approached. They moved with confidence, expecting an easy job. After all, they were dealing with a 93-year-old man and his grandson. How hard could it be? But John had other plans. As the first biker stepped onto the porch, a hidden alarm was triggered, alerting John to their exact position. With a swift motion, John activated a series of security measures. Lights flashed on, alarms blared, and a high-pitched screech filled the air, disorienting the attackers. "Stay low," John whispered to Ethan as they moved to a more secure position inside the house. The bikers, now thrown off balance, tried to regain their composure, but John's traps had been carefully set, and within moments, 2 of them were caught in snare-like devices that immobilized them. The leader of the group, a hulking man named Snake, wasn't so easily deterred. He barked orders to his men, smashing through the door with a crowbar, but as he entered the house, he was met with a different kind of resistance. John stood waiting, his old military-issued shotgun in hand aimed directly at Snake. "This is your last chance to walk away," John said, his voice calm but commanding. Snake sneered, unfazed by the sight of the elderly man. "You think you can take me, old man?" John's eyes didn't waver. "I've taken down worse than you." In a swift motion, Snake lunged forward, but John was ready. With expert precision, John fired a warning shot that grazed Snake's shoulder, sending him stumbling back in shock. Snake cursed, gripping his bleeding shoulder, but before he could react, more flashing lights filled the night. Unmarked cars sped onto the property, and federal agents poured out, guns drawn, ready to take down Lang's men. McCaffrey had sent backup just in time. The raid was swift and efficient. Lang's men were no match for the coordinated effort of the federal agents. One by one, the bikers were taken down, handcuffed, and loaded into waiting vehicles. Snake, still clutching his wounded shoulder, glared at John as he was led away. "You'll pay for this," Snake growled, his eyes filled with hate. John remained stoic, watching as the last of the bikers was taken away. He knew that this was far from over. Snake was just a pawn in Lang's game, and the real threat was still out there. As the dust settled, McCaffrey arrived, walking up to John with a look of admiration. "Still as sharp as ever, I see," McCaffrey said, clapping John on the back. "Old habits die hard," John replied with a small smile. "But this isn't over yet." McCaffrey nodded. "We're closing in on Lang. We've already seized millions of dollars in assets and shut down several of his operations, but we still haven't located him." John's expression hardened. "He'll come for me. I know he will, and when he does, I'll be ready." As John and Ethan sat in the aftermath of the raid, there was a sense of temporary relief. The immediate danger had been neutralized, but the looming threat of Victor Lang still hung over them like a dark cloud. Ethan looked at his grandfather, admiration in his eyes. "How did you know exactly what to do?" John chuckled softly. "Years of experience, kid. You learn to be prepared for anything." But as they sat there, Ethan's phone buzzed with a new message. His face paled as he read it. "What is it?" John asked, sensing the sudden tension. Ethan turned the phone toward his grandfather, showing him the message. It was from an unknown number, and it contained only 3 words. "I'm coming, John." Victor Lang had made his move. John stared at the message on Ethan's phone. He had expected this, but it didn't make the threat any less real. Victor Lang was not a man to be taken lightly, and now John knew that Lang would stop at nothing to eliminate the man who had dismantled his empire. But John wasn't afraid. He had faced worse odds before, and if Lang wanted a fight, he would get one. "We need to prepare," John said quietly, his mind already calculating their next moves. Ethan's fingers flew across his laptop. "I'm tracing the message. If I can figure out where Lang is hiding, we might be able to stop him before he reaches us." John nodded, appreciating his grandson's quick thinking. "Do it, but stay focused. Lang's going to be more dangerous than ever. As Ethan worked, John made another call to McCaffrey. They needed to coordinate a final strike on Lang before he could retaliate. Time was running out, and John knew that their window of opportunity was closing fast. Hours passed, and tension hung thick in the air. Ethan's screen blinked as the trace narrowed in on Lang's location. "Got him," Ethan said, his voice tight with anticipation. "He's holed up in an old warehouse outside of town. It's heavily guarded, but we have a shot at taking him down if we move fast." John picked up his shotgun, his face set in determination. "Then let's end this." McCaffrey's team was ready to move. They had mobilized agents and planned a coordinated strike on Lang's hideout. But John wasn't about to sit this one out. Despite his age, he knew that his experience and instincts were needed in the field. As the team approached the warehouse, John and McCaffrey rode in the lead vehicle. They knew this would be the final confrontation. Either they would take Lang down, or Lang would destroy everything they had worked for. The strike team moved in silently, surrounding the warehouse. The air was thick with anticipation, every creak of the building heightening the tension. Inside, Lang's men patrolled, unaware of the ambush that was about to hit them. John and McCaffrey exchanged a brief glance, their years of friendship and camaraderie shining through. They had been in battles like this before, but this one felt different. This was personal. As the team breached the warehouse, chaos erupted. Lang's men opened fire, but the federal agents were well prepared. The firefight was intense, with bullets flying and shouts echoing through the cavernous space. John moved through the chaos with surprising agility, his military training taking over. He made his way toward the heart of the warehouse, knowing that Lang would be there, waiting. John found Lang standing in a dimly lit room, surrounded by monitors and papers. The crime boss was calm, almost eerily so, as if he had been expecting John all along. "So, we finally meet," Lang said, his voice cold. "I've heard a lot about you, John Harris. You've been a thorn in my side for too long." John leveled his shotgun at Lang, his fingers steady on the trigger. "It's over, Lang. You've lost." Lang chuckled, his eyes narrowing. "Do you really think this ends with me? There will always be another. You've wasted your time." John's eyes didn't waver. "Maybe, but you won't be around to see it." Lang's hand moved toward a gun on the desk, but before he could grab it, John fired a single shot. The blast echoed through the room, and Lang crumpled to the ground, defeated. John stood there for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle was over, but the weight of it all lingered in the air. The aftermath of the strike left a sense of relief, but also a lingering tension. Victor Lang was dead, and his empire had been dismantled, but the scars of the battle would remain. McCaffrey's team swept through the warehouse, rounding up the last of Lang's men, while John and Ethan finally took a moment to breathe. As they walked out of the warehouse together, Ethan looked at his grandfather with a new sense of admiration. "You did it, Grandpa. It's over." John nodded, though his expression remained serious. "It's never really over, Ethan. There will always be people like Lang out there, but we did what we had to do." McCaffrey approached, clapping John on the back. "You saved a lot of lives today, John. I couldn't have done this without you." John gave a small smile. "It was a team effort, and I'm just glad we stopped him before it got any worse." As the sun began to rise, casting a golden light over the scene, John felt a sense of peace settle over him. The fight had been long and hard, but in the end they had prevailed. And for now, that was enough. With Victor Lang's empire in ruins, the town of Brooksville returned to its quiet, peaceful existence. The people who had once feared Rex's gang could now walk the streets without looking over their shoulders. John, once underestimated by so many, had proven that age was no barrier to strength, courage, and justice. Back at his porch, John sat in his familiar chair, the same one where this whole ordeal had begun. Ethan sat beside him, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced danger head-on, and together they had won. But as John gazed out at the horizon, he knew that this wasn't the end. There would always be new battles to fight, new challenges to face, and when the time came, he would be ready. This story reminds us that strength, wisdom, and bravery don't fade with age. John Harris may have been 93 years old, but he showed that true courage comes from within, and sometimes the most unexpected heroes are the ones who stand up when it matters most. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more thrilling and inspiring tales. Share this video with your friends and family, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. And remember, sometimes all it takes is one phone call to change everything.